The Adidas Torsion System versus high density EVA foam, which is going to win the war in terms of compression. Alright, so now let's talk construction of the Adipower and the Powerlift 3.1. So from afar, you can see a couple big differences about the shoes. For the Adipower, you have a TPU heel. The heel is about 0.75 inches, and it has the torsion system that Adidas offers through the midfoot. For the Powerlift 3.1, we have a high density EVA foam heel. The heel is at a height of about like 0.6 inches, and there's also this synthetic leather up here with the bigger strap. Those are the main overlapping differences that you could probably see from where you're at. But now let's take a closer look and see some of the subtle differences that come along with each model. Alright, so now let's dive into some of the deeper details that come along with each model. So we talked about it from afar, but there is a TPU heel on the Adipower, and it's a little bit higher than the Adidas Powerlift 3.1. Here we have the high density EVA foam, and as you can see, you can kind of compress it compared to this, which is a solid plastic. They are different in height. The Adipower is 0.15 inches higher. It falls into that category of like 0.75 inches. That's pretty standard for most weightlifting shoes. The Powerlift 3.1 is about like 0.65 inches high, and that's more of like a hybrid between what you might experience from like, let's say, a flat Converse and then a model like this, or even a higher inch model for a heel. So I think it's a good transition shoe in terms of the heel height itself. The 0.15 inch honestly doesn't feel like much of a difference if you're wearing both of them like I'm doing right now. It is going to be a subtle difference if you're doing a lot of weightlifting, but if you're just a recreational lifter, it's not that big of a deal. Working our way up to the heel cup itself. So we have kind of a similar design here with the stitching and the cup itself. As you can see, there's a little bit more compression on the Powerlift 3.1. The Adipower's heel is a little bit firmer, and I think that makes sense when you look at this tougher leather on the outside. And now transitioning to the outer material. Up here we both have synthetic leather mesh materials covering each shoe. They each offer holes in the front to offer some breathability, but the materials are pretty different. So looking at just even the touch, the Powerlift 3.1 compresses a lot more. It's a lot more maneuverable. It doesn't feel as sturdy as the leather here on the Adipower. And I think if you've ever owned an Adipower, you know that this is kind of more of a scratchier, tougher material compared to something that's a little bit softer like this, which is a little bit more mesh-based material. So making our way up to the tongues, and this is where you can really see the difference in outer shoe construction. So the tongue in the Adipower is a lot firmer, and it's like a little bit more stiff compared to the Powerlift 3.1. So the Powerlift 3.1's tongue is fully mesh. As you can see, it's very, very maneuverable. It doesn't have that inner layer here, which provides a little bit more stability as the Adipower, and I think that makes sense when you consider that this is more of a beginner shoe compared to this being more a focal point of weightlifting. Working our way up to the midfoot. So something that is pretty unique to this shoe, and that's the Adipower over here, is that it has Adidas Torsion System. So if you're a sneaker tech guy and you know anything about the Torsion System, it's basically Adidas' way of trying to separate the toe from the heel in terms of maneuverability and functionality. So this has a higher arch support in it, that I've found at least, and I think that it's very, very supportive in terms of letting the toe function separately from the heel. It doesn't feel like everything's bunched up all into one. It doesn't feel very blocky. It feels pretty non-limiting in terms of movement of the toe. We don't really have that on the Powerlift 3.1. It's a little bit more standard in its design. It ramps up pretty normally, and it feels similar to what you'd feel from like a Converse, but with a slightly elevated heel. And now making our way to the supportive straps. So torsion system, very different in the Adipower, but in terms of straps, there's not really much difference going on. I mentioned that in the section before that the Powerlift strap is a little bit larger, and it seems to be a little bit more maneuverable compared to the Adipower. This strap here is a little bit more stiff. It seems like a mesh and leather material. They're both going to be very supportive. They both offer this metal looping here to keep it safe and keep it durable. I don't think there's going to be any kind of strap break off anytime soon. I haven't heard any horror stories from that with these two models, so keep that in mind, but it is always a concern when you only have one single ankle strap. So let's take off the straps and let's look at the laces. So on the Adipower, and this is one of my gripes with the shoe, is that we only really have 4 eyelets going up. We have the 5th eyelet back here, but not a lot of people use that eyelet, and I don't either. So we have 4 eyelets on the whole shoe going up. And for me, that doesn't seem like enough, but it does get tight enough, so it's never a problem with stability. It's just a personal preference thing that I have. We have 6 eyelets over here. That's kind of standard with a lot of sneakers or training shoes. We have the 6th eyelet up here, and we have 5 running up. I like that because It provides a little bit more support down here on the toe. As you can see, the laces here come up a little bit higher. It looks like a V almost compared to like the standard go across and then pull through and go diagonally all the way up. Working our way back up to the laces themselves. The laces are a little bit different. You can always change out the laces, but if you do buy these shoes, the laces that come with the Powerlift 3.1 are a little bit more compressible. They're more of that mesh material compared to these, which are a little bit more nylon, and they kind of slide off depending on how you knot them, so that's something to be mindful of. If you like having different kinds of laces, that may be something you want to consider when looking at these two models. Working our way up to the boot itself. So the boot is pretty similar in each model. I actually think the Powerlift 3.1 might have it a little bit more compared to the Adipower, but remember that this heel is a little bit higher, so it's gonna be hard to tell. But just feeling the ridges here, this one feels a little bit more intense, and it feels a little bit lower on the lateral medial malleolus side, so I don't think there's gonna be a lot of friction on the ankle. This one doesn't feel like there's gonna be a lot of friction either, and plus there is a little bit more padding in the Powerlift 3.1. compared to the Adipower. The difference though is this. So I mentioned that there is more padding in the Powerlift 3.1. That's only up here at the top. Only at the top of the boot does it feel actually more padded compared to the Adipower. The Adipower goes all the way down, and you can actually see that the padding here has like a good shadow in the boot because it does go that low, and I think it's gonna be pretty supportive. In terms of heel support in each shoe, I think you're gonna be just fine with both models. Both feel pretty supportive. Both don't feel like they're gonna rub too much, and honestly, I never really experienced any rubbing with each heel, and I wear low socks when I do work out. Those are the main construction differences. Now let's look at the bottom of the shoe and see what it has to offer. So we mentioned the torsion system earlier, and you can really see that the midfoot here in the Adipower is a lot more narrow compared to the Powerlift 3.1. The Powerlift 3.1 looks a little bit more squatty in my opinion. This looks a lot more athletic. It looks more like a true Adidas shoe, which I think of like soccer or any other sport like that, where you're gonna be doing a lot of running, a lot of agility stuff. So does that mean that this isn't gonna be as supportive? Heck no, there is a visible difference here, and if you do like having a little bit more arch support, then the Adipower might be your move, but each shoe are gonna be just fine in terms of midfoot support. The outsole themselves, there is a little bit more of a textured material running up the Adipower here, and there is like more of like a, I wouldn't say grippier material, but it does seem to have a little bit more pull to it, especially when on like a rubber surface, which I tested these in. This is more of like a flatter surface. There are rigids here up on the heel and the toe, but again, they're not as deep and they're not as textured as the Adipower over here. And I do like the Adipower's rubber a little bit more than the Powerlift 3.1, but again, that's something to kind of keep in mind, that you are paying a little bit more for the Adipower. So these little differences do make sense, and it's not a knock against the Powerlift 3.1. It's just kind of what it is, because you are going to be paying a little bit more for a more premium and niche shoe. So all in all, I really think those are the main differences worth noting. We talked about the material, the heels, the heel height, the cup of the boot, the tongues, the laces, pretty much everything we tried to cover. If you did see anything we missed, leave a comment down below and I'll be sure to cover it. And also, if you want to see how these shoes construction compared to other models we've tried, Google BarBend and best weightlifting shoes. All right, so now the portion of the video that a lot of folks have been waiting for, the sizing and the fit. So I'm a size 10 model, and all of the shoes we've reviewed, I wear size 10. And that's to give you an accurate idea of the consistency of different makes, and to give you an idea if you should size up, stay true to size, or size down. So now let's lace up the models, see how they feel, and then I'll talk about my thoughts, because they do feel a little bit different. All right, so for our sizing comparison, I'm gonna lace each shoe up pretty tight to kind of get a feel of how each shoe tightens and laces in case you have a skinnier foot. I'm not gonna keep them loose because I don't think that's a fair comparison, especially on each model, because I really want them tight so they can really hug the foot and I could really feel the differences in terms of arch, heel, and toe. So I'm gonna pull that fully tight. As you can see, we have no strap overhang. If you're used to other models, I'm not gonna mention names that have a little bit of a strap that hangs on the ground. These definitely don't do that. Let's lace up the Adipowers. Again, I'm not so much a fan of the 4 laces, honestly, but they do feel tight, they do feel secure. It's not a matter of security, it's just personal preference. Pulling this fully tight, similar to the Powerlift, there's plenty of room here before that strap's gonna hit the floor, and I'm pulling that fully tight. So now let's talk and look at how they actually feel compared to how they're actually holding my foot. All right, so now how the heck do these shoes feel? For starters, I'm gonna make my way from the toe to the heel in each model and kind of talk about some of the things I'm feeling. So up here on the toe on the Powerlift 3.1, the material is a little bit more loose. There's a little bit more space up here. Wiggling my toes up, as you can see, I have a lot more mobility in the Powerlift 3.1 compared to the Adipower. As you can see up here too, looking side by side, the Adipower is a lot more narrow and it kind of like brings the toes together. That doesn't mean it limits splay because I'm actually pulling my pinky toe apart pretty well down here, and I'm doing the same in the Powerlift 3.1. So if toe splay is your concern, I think both models will work. Granted, I do have a more narrow foot, so if you have a wider foot, I would definitely be a little bit more mindful of the Adipower as being a little bit limiting. On the midfoot, what's interesting is that with the torsion system, I can really feel some support on my medial side of my shoe in here. So I'm having a lot of support if I try to angle my foot in compared to on the Powerlift 3.1. Powerlift 3.1 works just fine too, but there is a little bit more support in the Adipower model. On the heel, I don't notice much of a difference. Walking around, I do notice a bit of a difference in terms of softness of the heel in the Powerlift 3.1. It does feel a little bit more like a regular cross-training shoe compared to a lifter. This feels very much like a lifter because of the TPU and the harder outsole. So in terms of full feeling and in terms of the height difference, there's not much of a difference, but this does feel a lot more like a weightlifting shoe, which makes sense when you consider that this is a high-density EVA foam compared to a solid TPU. Now let's talk about length. So I'm a size 10, and I'm gonna show you this in the next clip, but there is a slight difference in terms of the foot's shoe's length. The Adipower is a slightly longer model compared to the Powerlift 3.1. That doesn't mean it doesn't fit my foot really well, but it does mean that there is gonna be a slight difference there, especially if you're teetering on a true size. So up here, my toe is about, I would say, 3/4 of an inch, maybe at a 1/2 inch before hitting the end. Here on the Adipower, it feels a little bit more towards 3.375 inches, or 0.75 inches, I mean, away from the front. So 3/4 of an inch, about a 1/2 to 3/4. And that makes sense because the Adipower is slightly longer. So I am gonna have a little bit more room up here on the toe. In terms of being true to size, I think honestly, if you're right at your size and you know that you are a 10 and you wanna buy a 10, I think you'll be pretty safe doing so. Personally, I like having like a 1/2 inch up here towards the end of my lifters because I don't like having toe jam, whether it be from catching in the clean, squatting, or even doing like, let's say like even a box jump if I'm wearing something like a Powerlift 3.1, I don't like toe jam, so that's big for me. I think you could be safe sizing a 1/2 size down. My only concern with that is that if you did so in the Adipower, you have to be mindful that this is a little bit more of a narrower shoe compared to the Powerlift 3.1, which I think you can kind of get away with. I would say stay true to size with these models. They fit pretty well. I'm not noticing a lot of wiggle room in any area of the shoe when they're pulley tight. So I think if you're true to size, you're pretty good going with that. All right, so as mentioned before, I did mention that these shoes are a little bit different in terms of sizing, and that makes sense when you consider their uses. Again, if you're true to size, I would definitely recommend going true to size in these, but I am gonna show you a little bit of the differences between the outsole and the width and also the length. So we have both shoes laying flat on their heels. I have myself a trusty butter knife. And as you can see, I'm trying to hold that as flat as I can. There is a slight variance in the shoe. If they're fully flat against each other, you could see it even a little bit more, pulling these fully tight. And there is like, I would say maybe not less than a centimeter, honestly, difference. So really the difference is so minimal. And in terms of outsole width, so laying them fully flat, as mentioned before in the construction section, we have the Adipower here with a slimmer midfoot, so it's probably not going to be a surprise that the Powerlift 3.1 has a slightly wider outsole up here on the toe. That doesn't mean toe splay is going to be limited by any means, but the outsole is a little bit more like wider and clunkier in my opinion. If you are confused on sizing at all, always leave a comment down in the comment section and I will help you out. If you wear a certain type of sock, let's say, and you want to be like, okay, is this going to fit my size that I usually wear in this model or this make? I can definitely help you out, so never feel like you can't leave a comment asking about sizing. So all in all, those are the differences between the sizing and the shoes. Hopefully I gave you some idea of how they're a little bit different. They are subtly different, but if you're true to size in your shoe, I think you should be good with either model. So let's talk price. Neither of these shoes are brand new to the market, and that's a great thing on your wallet. So for the Adidas Powerlift 3.1, you can expect to pay around like $80 to $100, and that's gonna come down to the color scheme you want and the retail outlet you end up going through. For the Adipower, you can expect to pay around like $150 to $200, and again, color scheme and retail outlet will influence that. In terms of finding specials in these shoes, You can find them online. There are times when these shoes will drop to maybe like, let's say 120, and these shoes will drop even lower than 80, and that's a great thing for your long-term investment. So all in all, the price in these, the Adipower is gonna be slightly more expensive. The Powerlift 3.1 is definitely one of the more cost-efficient shoes on the market. But in terms of price, I think you can find a fair price depending on what you want, depending on where you go through. All right, let's talk a couple pros and cons that come along with each model, and these are gonna be pretty personal, so if you find that there are different pros and cons per model, that's totally fine, but these are a couple things that I noticed. First pro that comes along with the Powerlift 3.1 is definitely the price. So the price of this model ranges like $80, $90, $100, and honestly for a lifter, especially if you're a beginner, I think that's a pretty good price, especially if you are not that kind of like super committal lifter and you're just more recreational. I think this is a good bet for you. I also like that there is a 0.665 inch heel. That's a great transition for somebody who has squatted more in like, let's say just a regular sneaker or a Converse, and they want to start elevating the heel. It doesn't jump right to that 0.75 inch or even the inch heels in some other weightlifting shoes. So this is a good transitionary shoe to wear if you're trying out elevated heels. Third pro I like about this model is the construction. So honestly, the price is lower than other weightlifting shoes, but don't let that deter you thinking that the construction isn't good. These shoes are pretty durable. I think they're gonna last you a while. And honestly, for the investment you're making, if you get a year, 2 years, 3 years out of this model, I think that's a win in my opinion. All in all, the construction's pretty good. The strap seems pretty firm. There's metal over here. There's double stitching all around the midfoot and the heel cup here. So I don't think these shoes are gonna break down pretty fast on you. In terms of cons, if you're a serious weightlifter and let's say you are training 3, 4, 5 times, 6 times a week even, you might find that this shoe isn't the best bet because the high density EVA foam heel, it doesn't compress a lot under weight, but it isn't the hardest when catching weight. So you may notice a little bit of a difference there. Again, that's gonna be very niche for the athlete and what they're using this shoe for. And the other con that I have with this model is that it does feel a little squatty and like loose. It doesn't give off the impression that it's not secure, not stable. It's a great shoe all in all. But if I'm being honest, compared to like the Adipower, it does have a little bit more looseness up here. And if you're really looking for a dedicated weightlifting shoe, this may not be your best bet. Honestly, I would think that this is better for more of the transition beginner athlete or even the more powerlifting athlete because there is the lower heel. So if you do squat a little bit more low bar, this is a little bit easier at resisting that whole fold to look like a folding chair with having the hip crease increase way too much with having an elevated heel and the squat. So let's talk about a couple pros and cons that come along with the Adipower. So first pro that I liked with the Adipower is the torsion system. If you're a fan of having a supported midfoot and you like having that toe kind of move synonymous, like away from the midfoot and the heel itself, this is a great model. I think the heel here is very stable. This is not gonna break down anytime soon on you. In fact, if this does break down on you, I would be incredibly surprised. And lastly, I like the support of the construction. So this is a little bit of a heavier material, and that makes sense when you consider that it is a more niche weightlifting shoe. It is a little bit more expensive than the Powerlift 3.1. So it does make sense when you consider that this does have a heavier construction to it. Also, let's not leave out the tongue here that does have added support. A lot of weightlifting shoes don't have that. Let's not call out names here, but there are popular models that have a very flimsy tongue, and this tongue is definitely lack of flimsy. So let's talk cons of this model. First, this isn't gonna be a good model if you're doing any kind of like functional fitness training and you're going through a workout that includes jumps, power cleans, squats, and stuff like that. This is a very more niche weightlifting shoe. In my opinion, I don't think it's gonna be very comfortable for that at all. Catching a jump on this TPU heel is not gonna feel great, I can promise you that. Lastly, and this is my gripe that I had earlier, and I've mentioned this so many times because I'm a stickler on it, the laces. I am not a huge fan of having 4 laces that run up. Again, there's a 5th lace up here, but if you don't like lacing all the way up and you feel that's restrictive to your ankle mobility, then that's gonna be an issue. But the shoe itself will pull tight and will feel plenty stable for you, but my gripe is that I like having a couple more laces. That way I have a little bit more wiggle room. That way I can feel full tight all the way down to the metatarsals. Here we only have one little support here and then it V's up. So all in all, pros and cons that come along with each model. It's gonna really come down to your personal preference. I think this is a better shoe for beginners or transitioning lifters from flat to heeled shoes, and I think this is better for any kind of weightlifting athlete or someone who's a little bit more serious in their training. Both models will match your needs pretty well, so it's really going to come down to what you prefer, what you want to spend, and how you lift. That concludes my comparison of the Adidas Powerlift 3.1 and the Adidas Adipower. Hopefully this review gave you a little bit more insight into each model and maybe helped you with your decision if you've been in between the two. If you have any other questions on construction, sizing, performance, make sure to leave a comment down below. And if you want to see other models in the market and you're not completely sold on either of these Adidas models and you want to look at maybe let's say more Nike, Do-In, or Reebok models, make sure to Google BarBend and best weightlifting shoes and we have all the best picks there.